everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Creepy Fox podcast. Love is in the air, and this time around, we're going to be covering some pretty scary and bizarre Valentine's Day stories that were sent in by subscribers like yourselves. Now, hey, before we get started with today's episode, I just wanted to go ahead and remind you all that I uploaded a brand new Scary Stories video a couple of days ago. Apparently, YouTube has really been broken lately, because I've noticed that many of you haven't been getting notifications for the videos or seeing them in your subscriptions feed. So make sure to go to my channel and check out the videos you might have missed, especially since I know a lot of you look forward to these videos. It's just a shame you don't get to watch them because YouTube decides, nope, we're not going to send it to them. But enough of YouTube's broken systems for now. Sit back, relax, and enjoy these true and scary Valentine's Day stories. Anyone else remember when you were a kid and when Valentine's Day rolled around, you'd get all excited for the candy and treats you would get at school? I remember those years when my mom and I would go shopping and grab chocolates, candies, and those little Valentine's cards that come in those boxes you can hand out to your classmates. I know I still have some of them somewhere in a box in my attic. Now, while I can spend hours talking about all the good times in elementary school, as would anyone else with nostalgia, I want to instead focus on what happened to me in my school on Valentine's Day of 2003. It's a day I will never forget. Obviously, I'm not going to remember the exact dialogues of everything said, so understand that this is going to involve some paraphrasing. I also enlisted the help of a friend of mine to assist me with remembering some of the details I missed. We will call her Veronica. She's the only friend from elementary school I still talk to, and she was actually in the room with me the day this happened. So, to skip a lot of the boring details, I want to jump to after lunch that day. All of us students have now returned back to our classroom, and we're starting the Valentine's Day mini party. We're going around our class handing out our little goodies and cards and laughing amongst ourselves as my teacher sat there at his table, grading some papers and listening to the music he had playing over his computer. It was about, I'd say 15 minutes in, and we were all suddenly interrupted by an alarm, followed by a message over the intercom system. We're going into lockdown. This is not a drill. 911 has been called. Please lock all your doors and stay away from any windows. All us kids start freaking out, but in our innocent sixth grader minds, we think this has to be some sort of joke. It wasn't. My teacher now instructs everybody to get into the back corner of the room as he locks our door, closes the blinds, and shuts down the lights. Naturally, we're all starting to wonder just what exactly is going on as some of the kids start laughing and making jokes. I think this was their way to cope with the current events that were unfolding. I remember my teacher getting on the phone, and after he hung up, we saw the fear in his eyes, and we knew that this lockdown wasn't just something innocent. One of the students overheard the staff on the phone mention the word knife to our teacher since she was close to him, and when we asked him about it, he just responded back with, "Yes, but we need to remain quiet and we need to remain calm until the police arrive." About 5 minutes into the lockdown, one of the kids, for some dumb reason, decided to break away from the group that's huddled at the back of the room and crawls over to peek through the blinds. My teacher in his hushed voice is angry and he's telling him to come back. What my classmate saw scared him so bad that he immediately ran back in fear, trying not to cry. Moments later, we can see the door handle is beginning to shake, and we can hear somebody on the other end. Everybody starts to freak out. "Don't open the door. He's got a huge knife. It's not the police," our classmate said, as my teacher then tries to comfort him and tells him to remain quiet. Moments that seemed to go on for an agonizing eternity that were only maybe less than 15 seconds, the door handle stops shaking, and we all start to let out sighs of relief, at least for now. A few minutes later, we were able to hear the sounds of police sirens and even the sound of a helicopter above. Apparently, the whole police station and the police force had been called in. Needless to say, after a total of 45 horrifying minutes filled with anxiety and fear, the lockdown was lifted, and a police officer comes to our door to let us all out. By now, the school is filled with everybody's parents, including mine, who couldn't stop crying and thanking the heavens above that I and everybody else was safe. So, here's the lowdown on what happened. It turned out that there was a guy who was on drugs and completely out of it. He was walking around the nearby neighborhoods with a large hunting knife. He had stabbed someone, who luckily survived, and then from there, he ended up walking onto our campus. A hall monitor ended up noticing him. She immediately ran into a nearby room to notify the front office, who then called the police and issued the lockdown. It's just so crazy to think that we were involved in such a scary incident. But if there was one good thing, nobody at the school was harmed. Well, except for the guy with the knife. He was tased. Years have gone by, and any time I think about elementary school, that event sticks out to me the most. Really just goes to show you, anything can happen, even on Valentine's Day. Treat every day as if it was your last. That's a saying I'm sure most of you listening have heard at least one time in your life. It's meant to motivate people not to take life for granted, and to teach others that if you have a dream you're striving for, take today to make that first step. Not saying you have to have it all completed in a day, but set up a little program to reach that goal. While goal making has nothing to do with my scary experience, the whole don't take life for granted really comes into play. Because 1 minute everything is fine, next moment you're fearing for your life. Such was what happened to me on Valentine's Day of 2011. For reference, this takes place in Compton, California. I'm sure just mentioning that city name, a lot of you will think of popular songs and pop culture references. Well, how about this? On this evening, my girlfriend and I had gone to this really nice restaurant to celebrate not only Valentine's Day, but her upcoming birthday, which was on the 17th. Food was great. I had myself a steak dinner with some mashed potatoes, and my girlfriend had herself a salmon with a salad. After food, we drove around town for a while and then decided we'd go get some ice cream before I would drop my girlfriend off at her place. When we arrived at the ice cream shop, they told us they would be closing in about 5 minutes, but they would be more than happy to serve us. Well, there went our hanging out at the ice cream shop and just talking. We grabbed ourselves a couple of cups of sugary, creamy goodness to go, and we made our way to my girlfriend's neighborhood. We now spent about 15 minutes just sitting in my car, talking about life, listening to music, and just relaxing and enjoying the cool February air. So far, nothing scary. Well, out of nowhere, we ended up hearing a loud pop, which at first we thought was one of the neighborhood kids lighting up some firecrackers. It happens occasionally. Then, there was another pop, and we knew at this moment what we were hearing were gunshots. My girlfriend and I took cover as we soon began to hear arguing and even a car start up nearby. I happened to have looked up from my seat, and at that moment, I kid you not, a round actually hits the back of my vehicle, which makes my girlfriend scream. I held her tightly and held back my own tears as I feared they were targeting us. However, we would soon learn that the target was the vehicle that was near us. Remember how I said I heard a car start up? It just so happened that a bullet ricocheted and hit my car. After what felt like hours, but was only maybe about 20 seconds, we heard tires screeching on the pavement, and then things fell silent. We ended up looking up from cover, and we can see as 3 men are walking out of one of the nearby homes. From the looks of it, it appeared one of them had been hit in the arm, as I could see some blood. My girlfriend recognized him as one of the oldest neighbors, and at this point we called 911 to get him some medical attention. Luckily, he did survive his injury. Police did do their investigations and whatnot, And when I talked with my girlfriend a couple of days later, she told me about what happened. Turned out there were some arrests due to findings of crack. Also, as for the shootout, that was because of a deal gone wrong between that son and the ones buying. They were the ones who shot at them who at the same time happened to have hit my car in the process. I did get the car fixed. That wasn't a problem. But you can imagine how it left my girlfriend and I. Traumatized, but thankful to God to be alive. She and I have since gotten married, and we have now relocated to Riverside, California, where to this day, we haven't had any more encounters like that ever again. This is an experience I've been wanting to share for quite some time, and it's only now I decided to share it online for the world to hear. I hope it can teach others to speak up when something is wrong. Before I begin my story, which has its climax on Valentine's Day of 2015, I need to first provide a bit of context. That way you get a better sense and understanding. I'm female. I was 22 years old at the time, and I was working at a store that sold bird supplies, as well as adoptions for birds. Such birds as cockatiels, parakeets, aka budgies, macaws, doves, just to name a few. When I first began working there, we would have this visitor who for this retelling we're going to call Brian. Brian was a homeless man who for some reason loved coming into the store just to talk with the birds and even have conversations with us employees. This wasn't really an issue, and I actually can tell you I considered him like a friend at first. However, over a few weeks that he would show up to the store, his visits would be less about the birds and more about the employees. More importantly, me. These conversations he would try to have with me started off with him asking me stuff like, "Hey, do you have a boyfriend?" Or other times such as, "You want to go and grab some dinner and hang out?" I would always ignore these little advances and quickly change the subject to birds, and he would just go along with it, probably realizing my lack of interest. One day he shows up like normal, and he brings up the whole want to go out on a date thing, while trying to be sneaky with his wording. When I changed the subject, this time instead of just being like, "Well, okay, whatever," he snapped at me, calling me a bunch of curse words, and then throwing a temper tantrum on how I was playing hard to get, and that I had to stop leading him on. Yeah, in no way, shape, or form was I ever doing such. I mean, I even kept telling him I had a boyfriend. There was no way I was just going to dump him to begin a new life with Brian. Brian stormed out of the store that afternoon, but what he told me, which would haunt me for weeks after that, was something that even today, I don't forget. "I'm going to make you pay. Just you wait. When you least expect it, you'll pay." That stuck to me like glue. One of the customers who happened to have been there and heard the whole thing approached me and asked me if I was okay. I told him I was, but that I was a bit shaken up, but it wasn't anything I couldn't handle. I had a talk with my boss later that shift, and he told me that if he ever showed up again, not only would he be kicked out, but he would call the cops, because now he was starting to become a problem for me. Well, he did show up one other time, but my boss saw him and immediately kicked him out and threatened to call the cops. That seemed to have worked, and things fell silent for about 6 months. Now, with that bit of leading up in context out of the way, I present to you this scary encounter that I would have. It's the morning of Valentine's Day, 2015, and I'm working in the evening. It was a fairly routine 4-hour shift, and during my break, I was sitting outside in the back parking lot, eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and talking to my dad over my cell phone, who at the time was in the hospital recovering from the removal of a non-cancerous tumor in his leg. I guess sort of like you, creepy fox, with your tumor that you had in your knee. Anyways, from the corner of my eye, I was able to make out a tall, dark figure walking up to me very slowly. My attention was on my food, and at first I just assumed it was a customer who was about to pass me and head to the front of the building. This person stopped in place, and before I got a chance to react or say a word, this individual reaches down and puts his hand over my mouth. He then told me to shut up and not say a single word as I struggled to get away from him, my cell phone dropping to the floor and bouncing off the concrete ever so slightly, as I can hear my dad asking me what was happening. What was happening was Brian. He's got a strong hold of me, and he's trying to pull me away from the building into the darkness. He was strong, but my adrenaline and determination to get away was stronger than he could ever be. Without even thinking, I moved my head just enough to be able to bite down on his hand so hard that I even tasted blood. He let go in agony as I took a few steps back. Brian, no joke, pulled out a pocket knife and then told me I was going to pay for biting him. You best believe I finally broke out of my silence, screaming like a lunatic and calling for help, while at the same time trying to ensure people would get out of Brian's sudden rageful attack. Thank God that as this happened, a couple of regulars who just so happened to have shown up at that time bumped into me just as I turned the corner of the back of the building, hearing my calls for help. I pointed to Brian, who now stopped in place and stood there in silence. Brian put the pocket knife back in his pocket, just as the two regulars were about to head over to beat the living you-know-what out of him. They didn't, as Brian just ended up running away, but this didn't mean we didn't immediately call the cops. While the cops failed to locate him that night, I did learn a day later he was arrested and he was charged. Brian wasn't as innocent as he made himself out to be, as it was further relayed to me that he had quite the criminal background. During the time I didn't see him, I guess he was serving some time in jail, which explained why things had gone silent. It's just scary to think that he never forgot about me during that time period, and he must have been planning to try and grab me when I least expected it, hiding in the shadows and learning of my break schedule, as well as how I liked to hang out at that one spot every time I was on break. This did affect me a lot, and I had to seek therapy due to how traumatizing the whole incident was. I did continue to work there for another few months, before I eventually put in my 2 weeks, and I left. It's been many years since this incident. I live in another state across the country. I'm currently engaged, and I'm so much happier with life than I was months after what happened. Just like I mentioned at the start, please, when you notice somebody acting creepy and you feel uncomfortable, you need to speak up. The last thing you need is to end up like me. Valentine's Day is supposed to be that one time of the year where everyone is all super lovey-dovey and whatnot. Not a day where you expect to have a life-changing, altering experience that's going to leave you traumatized for months to come. But alas, that's what I found myself experiencing last year. For a bit of context, I'm an 18-year-old male, and this takes place in the state of Utah. This Valentine's night, I was home alone as my dad, who is a security guard, was at his job like normal. It's just myself and him since my mother had passed a few years prior, and my dad had yet to remarry or date anyone. No longer being a child, this wasn't the end of the world. Any other young adults and teenagers know that when your parents aren't home, you're basically free to do whatever you want without having to suffer the embarrassment of your parents seeing or hearing the silly things you do. Anyways, no shenanigans were involved that night, other than ordering a pizza from Domino's with the money my dad had left me on the kitchen table, and watching JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Stardust Crusaders for the third time in my living room. We have a 60-inch flat-screen TV in there, so it always made binge-watching shows perfect. At about 7:30 p.m., halfway through my medium pepperoni pizza, I got a knock at my front door. I've always been the paranoid type, so at first I did ignore the knocks. However, when I recognized the voices of the kids calling out my name, I had a feeling what was going on. So I opened the front door, and it's the two neighbor kids asking if I could go and grab their ball, which just so happened to have gone over the brick wall as they played. They also asked if they could come say hello to my two pet rabbits, who are honestly some of the cutest little fluff balls you'll ever meet. I agreed, and I ushered them in, as we head into the backyard and I grab their ball, which happened to have been stuck in the backyard tree. After a couple of minutes, the kids exit through the side gate, and I return back to my pizza and Jotaro and company on their quest to find Dio. Fast forward about an hour later, I'm in the kitchen washing some dishes, and I happen to hear noise coming from my backyard. My rabbits are silent, and it's not like it was raining or windy or anything. So what exactly was I hearing? I thought to myself for maybe 15 seconds, and then I said, perhaps it was the kids grabbing their ball again. They will sometimes just climb over the wall, but their dad would always tell them not to do that, since 1, it's dangerous, and 2, you don't just go into your neighbor's backyard without permission. Bless those kids' hearts, they just don't know any better. Well, I figured I would go check up on them because the last thing I needed was for the ball to be stuck in the tree again, and they then try to set up a ladder and climb up to get it. So I dried my hands, grabbed my cell phone, and I make my way outside, heading down the little walkway that's in between my garage and the back part of my house. Little was I to know what I was about to stumble into. As I turned the corner ready to see the kiddos, I have all the hairs stand up on my back when I happen to catch the process of a person dressed in all black with a ski mask covering their identity, trying to pry open my back door with a rusty old crowbar. Without even thinking, I shouted out, "What are you doing in my backyard?" I was ready to throw hands, even though this dude had a crowbar. Well, it turned out the crowbar was the least of my concern. He doesn't just run away like a normal burglar might have when they were caught in the act. Actually, he does the complete opposite. He stands his ground, and then he pulls out a handgun and tells me to be quiet, or he was going to shoot me dead right there and then on the spot. "Don't you dare call the cops, or you're dead, kid," I remember him saying. I freaked out. I didn't care at that point. I booked it down the walkway, half expecting I was going to be shot in the back at any second. I guess when adrenaline and fear take over, your body will just do things without you having full control. I dove through the kitchen door, lock it, and then I run upstairs toward my dad's room, where he's got a couple of guns himself. I grabbed the shotgun and loaded that bad boy up, locking myself in and calling 911. The whole time I kept thinking this man I stumbled into was going to break into my house, find me, and try to kill me for good. But little would he know that I had my own self-defense. Thank God he didn't break in, but by the time the police drove up into my neighborhood, the potential home burglar was now long gone. Officers did do a patrol of my neighborhood, however they never did catch the guy, which left me super scared and paranoid for months. My neighbor, the dad of the 2 kids, did tell me he heard me scream when I ran from the burglar, but of course he never saw the man. We just came to the conclusion that he must have climbed his way over the backyard wall from the back alleyway. It's just crazy how nobody saw him. My dad came home early that night from his work, and I ended up staying over at my grandma and grandpa's house across town for a few days because I was just so paranoid to stay in my house on my own. We did get all the locks changed, a security system was installed, and luckily since then, there have been no more incidents of scary happenings. I do wonder to this day, however, would that guy have shot me? Or was he just bluffing? I'll never know, which in a way, I'd rather just not think about that at all. This happened to me on Valentine's Day of 2013. I had just come out of my English writing class at 10 p.m. and I couldn't stop thinking about food. The last time I'd ate was earlier that day for lunch at about 1 p.m. at the university cafeteria. All I had was just a plain old boring sandwich I packed from home and a smoothie I'd purchased at the Jamba Juice, so it was decided I would go get myself a bite to eat at In-N-Out. Here's the thing with me, however. I don't usually like to pay with card, so I rely on cash to make my purchases. However, one look inside my purse, and all I remember having was $2 and some change, not exactly enough for a hamburger. Maybe just a shake, but that's it. Well, considering I'm too tired to make something at home, and I'm still so insistent in paying with cash, I decided I would just stop by at the ATM machine that's nearby my university. So I get into my car, make a short 5-minute drive to the school's first credit union, and I pull up ready to make my transaction. Just a quick little visual of this area to give you an idea. You have the school's first credit union building, the parking spaces in front of it. Then a short distance away there's an IHOP with its own parking spaces. Behind the school's first credit union are some offices that were currently closed. I only wanted to bring up those details because apart from just some cars that were parked next to the IHOP, where I currently was, it's pretty empty and quiet. The only movement I saw came from the nearby street and cars passing by, and the bushes and trees moving with the breeze. But I digress. I got out of my car, go up a couple of steps, and then place my card into the ATM machine so I can begin my transaction. About 10 seconds later, I hear a sound come from one of the nearby bushes that startles me and causes me to jump for a quick second. I took a look, half expecting to see a squirrel or some other little animal, but instead it's a full-sized grown man. It almost seemed as if he was talking to someone else who wasn't there, but I wasn't too sure, nor was I there to judge him. Right as the money popped out of the machine, the man now tells me, "Hey, can you give me that money?" I took one look at him and said, "Are you serious? I wasn't just going to give this guy a $20 bill. I wasn't trying to be mean, but I mean, come on." I grabbed my receipt and I turned my back to him to head to my car. Big mistake. I should have kept my eyes on him the whole entire time. I made my way down the couple of steps, take a few paces to my car, and what I hear behind me sends shivers down my spine. "Give me that money, now," the man says, now grasping a little knife. Oh, that was it. That sent my nerves into overdrive. I dove into my driver's seat, locked the door, and then immediately called 911. The man, for whatever reason, decided to kick at the side of my door as I'm pulling away, and I even happened to hear him threaten me one last time. Instead of driving away completely, since he was armed with a knife, I drive over to the IHOP so I could make sure I kept an eye on this creep. Thankfully, the man didn't follow me over. He just paced back and forth for a few seconds before reaching back down into the bushes and grabbing his backpack and his belongings. I watched him as he walked away, as if nothing had just transpired. Cops did get there, and after a short search, they find the knife-wielding homeless man in a nearby alleyway, smoking out of a glass pipe. Needless to say, frightened but glad not to have been stabbed, I bid adieu to the police after giving my statement, and I made my way home instead, where I make myself a cup of noodles and spend the next hour talking to my roommate to try my best to calm my nerves. The next day I had the day off, as did my roommate, and even though she was there with me the entire time, I couldn't help but think for some reason the man would somehow break out of custody, come find me, and demand his $20 bill. Otherwise, he would stab me. That never happened, obviously, but it was a recurring nightmare I had for weeks after. Thankfully, I haven't had anything else as scary as that happen to me again, and I just hope it will remain that way. To everyone listening, please stay safe. Hey everyone, thanks for making it to the end of today's episode. Those were quite some pretty chilling stories, wouldn't you say? If you did enjoy this episode, and you are new around here, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you can tune into brand new exclusive stories that are shared here on the Creepy Fox channel. Speaking of the Creepy Fox channel, have you heard the preview of the brand new song? That's right, dropping March 8th is the first single that I produced with fellow musician Dory Lou from the band Mary Bell. I'll actually give you a preview right now since, as we spoke about in the intro, YouTube is not sending my videos to your subscriptions feed, so enjoy this little preview. So that's just a little sneak peek at my brand new single that's coming here to the Creepy Fox. You can pre-order it right now on Amazon or iTunes. Just type in the Creepy Fox and you'll find it that way. I know a lot of times people ask me how they can support me and the channel, and really supporting me on these sorts of projects, it goes a long way. It sucks because, sometimes I want to be able to do other sorts of videos. As I've told you all, I love doing the narration content, and don't worry, none of that's ever going away. But as you've seen, there's definitely been a decrease in uploads, and that's just, kind of been due to the lower story submissions, which is why I've been doing these other sorts of projects, whether it be, releasing little sneak peeks and animation clips of my series, whether in this case it be producing a song. So all I really just ask of you all is, just to give it a chance. A lot of times, listeners will just listen to one sort of content a content creator produces. In my case, it'd be the scary stories. And then everything else I produce kind of just goes ignored. So, it's a shame, but hey, I like to be able to release a variety of content, so it's not just, burning me out just doing the same thing, over and over again. But yeah, that was just one little thing I wanted to cover there. Other than that, I want to go ahead and say thank you to everybody who's been supporting me, especially my channel members. I want to go ahead and say thank you to Robbie, Haiti, Spunky the Nutcase, Bo, Rice and Beans, Scott, Sean, Corey, as well as Blaze Goddess. Thank you also to the regular viewers who leave their comments, leave their likes, as well as tell their friends and family about the Creepy Fox to help grow the channel. Anyways, everyone, that's going to do it for me today. I'll catch you all next time. Take care and have yourself an amazing day.